So I have a question. Have you ever wondered why realtors get a bad rap? This is the whole stereotype about them, pushy, greedy, or even a little bit, shall I say, sleazy? But is it really fair? Today, we're going to dive into the top 10 reasons behind the negative perception of realtors. Yes, it's true. We'll look at some of the valid criticisms, separate the truth from the unfair stereotypes, and more importantly, we'll explore why this industry desperately needs more professionalism and greater transparency. My name is Ralph Fox, and I'm the broker of record of Fox Marin. Please don't forget to subscribe, like, or comment, because we'd absolutely love to hear from you, because we love you, or most of you. Anyways, I have a great group here today with over 40 years. Oh my God, 40 years of combined experience in the business. We have Jessica Rubash, aka the Queen of Acquisitions, broker and VP of Sales at Fox Marin, the distinguished and highly lovable Ian Busher, broker and VP Sales at Fox Marin, and Kori Marin, my partner in crime, broker and co-founder of Fox Marin. Okay, so if you're watching this, I'm sure you're like, let's get into this. So without further ado, that's exactly what's going to happen here. Let's jump into this and break this all down. So I'm going to go a little off script here and just kick this off with how much damage has reality TV done to the brand and reputation of real estate agents? And I'm just going to throw this out there. Who would like to jump in first?
Oh, I'm happy to do this one.
Okay. Someone had their Wheaties this morning.
Yes, always have my Wheaties. 100%. This has definitely tarnished an already challenging stereotype to get over. But when you see television shows like Selling Sunset, Buying Beverly Hills, $1 Million Listing, I think people perceive that our work is exactly like those shows, which is all about high fashion, big ticket luxury items, schmoozing with clients, going for dinner, and then constantly talking about our commissions and rolling around in private vehicles or our luxury Porsche. So we all know in this inner circle, and anyone who's an agent working in Toronto anyways, that is 100% not what it's like. And I think I spend the majority of my time probably in like the schleppiest clothes you could possibly imagine, hustling from one side of the city to the other. I'm happy if I have washed my hair, and I am spending a lot of time and a lot of hours behind my screen, talking to clients on the phone, navigating challenging situations, navigating emotions. And I almost say that glamorous aspect of how things are perceived or seen on television is maybe 0.5% of what we do. Not even. I don't even think I've seen a property like that in real life in Toronto. So I think it's a very difficult stereotype to overcome when people see this in their faces and their social media all the time.
I will follow that up with a term that I heard when I started in this business, which is the iceberg career, where when you see an iceberg, you really only see the 10 to 15% of it that's above the waterline. The other 80 to 90% is below the water, and that's what does all the damage. People watching us only see, and that's what these TV shows focus on, is that 10 to 15% that looks like, hey, look, we just sold this place. This place looks amazing. And they don't show you the places that aren't selling and the clients that are upset and the properties that are not luxury. So
like
it's
most of them.
Like a lot of them. Exactly. And yeah, I agree with Kori. I am behind a screen, not people facing a lot of the day, schlubby clothes, cleaning out showers that got missed before photos, right? Like all kinds of horrible things that we do to get the ball across the line and into the net.
Yes.
And
I literally was like on my hands and knees yesterday with a spray bottle and some paper towel, cleaning the floors after the contractors were there before the stagers came in to lay down the carpets. And I was like sitting there, I'm like, oh my gosh, I wish somebody was taking a video of this right now, because they would never believe this is actually what's happening.
Reality.
Kori, it was also 5 a.m. in the morning when you were doing this.
Yes, I forgot that part.
Reality TV is the furthest thing from reality.
Yes, so true.
TV is made to sell TV. TV is not made to actually encompass what it is that we do accurately.
It will be interesting to see what happens on the new Toronto Amazon Prime show, because they're coming out with like Lux Toronto or Toronto Lux or something on Amazon Canada. I'm very interested to see how that is perceived and like what the comments are like and what happens with all of that, because it's really weird to watch the preview and be like, oh, it's just funny to see Toronto pieced together like that, because we all know what it's actually like here.
Now, Jess, I think you might have a couple thoughts on this topic, so I'd love to put the microphone in your direction.
No, I think Kori and Ian did a great job of covering it. I also was going to bring up the iceberg analogy, and I think...
Sorry for
no,
stealing
that's
that.
okay.
Great minds.
Like you guys said, TV shows are meant to be entertaining. Most of the time, nobody's going to be very interested in seeing Kori clean the bathtub at 5 a.m. And I think a lot of these shows are an opportunity for the characters to be just that, characters. I think that if the public actually saw some of the more monotonous tasks that go into our day-to-day and all the sacrifices that we make, I think the rhetoric would be very different. But that's also not to say that everyone is doing this. You know, there are people that, you know, are in it for the glam and are only doing a couple showings a day and think more about their commissions than the client's best interest. So what's true for one person is not necessarily true of the group. And I think anytime you have a low barrier of entry and an oversaturated market with a ton of professionals, 75,000 agents in the GTA, you're going to have those varying levels of sophistication and levels of commitment. And that's really seen today in the Toronto real estate market.
So true.
Okay, well, I just want to say that these shows make me hate real estate agents, number one. And number two, they make me embarrassed to be a real estate agent. And number three, I think they do a tremendous disservice and a high amount of collateral damage to the reputation and brand of what an agent actually does and the value that they give to their clients. It's awful. And the fact that somebody might be watching these shows and think that this is a portrayal of reality really, really, really is upsetting to me, because I know who the top agents are in Toronto, and I know what they had to do to get there and the sacrifices that they had to make to get there. And there is a reason why 0.01% of 75,000 are at the top. And it takes a tremendous amount of work and selflessness to be able to look after your client's best interest. And all of these agents are they're not even agents, first of all. Generally, they don't do any real volume. And they're so self-indignant and self-absorbed and selfish that while it might be entertaining to watch these clowns running around, in reality, they aren't doing anything or adding any value to the process or to their clients. And therefore, in the real world, most of them would not even have a television show.
I have a question for this panel right now. If somebody from Bravo or from, I don't know, Amazon came to you and said, we'd like to cast you in the next season of XYZ, would you say yes or no to that, Jessica?
I mean, we wouldn't even have the time to dedicate ourselves to something like that, first of all. But I don't think that I would do something like that, because knowing that you have very little control over what is ultimately portrayed, I think it's very likely to be more detrimental than helpful, especially in a place like Toronto, where we're in the midst of not only a housing crisis, but an affordability crisis. And I think now more than ever, what the public wants is somebody that's relatable, somebody that they can trust, and somebody that they know is going to be in their corner at the end of the day. And sometimes when you are portraying yourself in a very overly glamorous, overly luxurious way, it can erode trust, and it can come off in the wrong way, and it can create a huge disconnect between the client and the person that's being represented. And I think at the end of the day, people want somebody in their corner, and trust is everything, and how you portray yourself plays a huge role into that.
Yes. Ian, Ralph, would you agree with that?
Yeah, I think what Jessica said is spot on. And it's funny because Kori and I were laughing at this, is we looked at the advertisement like on Amazon for the new Toronto Luxe show, and we read all the comments, and all the comments were just like, this is totally tone deaf. We're in a housing crisis.
Mm-hmm.
There's a food shortage. This is so devoid of reality. And the portrayal of these people is so despicable. A shame on Amazon for trying to put this out there at a time, at a moment like this. And I found that very, very interesting. And I think it aligns with exactly what you're saying, Jess.
Mm-hmm.
Me too.
Yeah, I agree. If I was approached, I think my first call would be to the team to say, can someone take over my book of business if I even consider this? Like, who would step in and take care of my list of... Yeah, I think that comment, like, who has time to do a TV show if you're really legitimately doing this? And the answer would likely be no one. Mm-hmm. But my answer as a blanket statement to the whole thing would be, it depends. I would want to hear what the show was about. And if they said, we're going to get you a Lambo SUV and, a bunch of suits, and you're going to go to lunch with a bunch of other suits every day and eat bonbons and drink champagne, I'd be like, yeah, I think I'm going to take a pass on that. But if there's an opportunity there to educate and inform, and it was actually going to be grounded in reality, then I might consider it.
Yes.
But that's probably very unlikely.
So if you're watching from Bravo right now, we're negotiable, but we have our priorities. Mm-hmm. We have our values, which we will stick to. Okay, well, I think that was really interesting, and I just had to throw this out there because I think it's one of the main catalysts in my mind anyways, to my experience. So let's talk about these massive high commissions that realtors get. And let's talk about how the perception is, again, it comes to perception, that all realtors do is just make a ton of money, show no value, and just roll around naked in cash.
Every night.
I haven't done that since Tuesday.
Yeah. So who would like to comment on that?
I'm happy to. I even feel like my own parents think that we do that.
Oh, because we do, obviously.
Oh my gosh, we totally do. Well, I mean, let me take a step back. Before I actually was an agent, I had that perception as well. Mm-hmm. And I had a small real estate portfolio before I became a real estate broker, and I was trading and flipping properties and buying pre-construction. And I worked with one specific agent who was great and handled everything very professionally. But I remember always thinking, oh my God, he's making so much money. Like I always thought that. I'm like, he just made X, Y, Z. And I did not understand, that was gross. I didn't really understand that half of that went to the buyer agent. And then I had no perception of the fact that that money was taxed, that there was a fee to the brokerage, that there'd be a desk fee, and then all his costs of running a business had to come off the top as well. So net, he was not doing as well as I had perceived. And I did not really truly understand that until I got into the business. And you guys have all heard my story before, but my first commission check in real estate was $0.00. And it was a rental. And so obviously not a big paycheck on a rental, but by the time I paid the referral fee to the agent, the referral fees to the brokerage, I paid my desk fee, and I think a marketing fee, it literally netted to zero. And I was like, this is going really well. Really well. I'm crushing it just like I expected. So I definitely think there is that perception when you look at the gross number or a percentage of the sale price that it is perceived as being a lot. And I don't even really feel like clients really want to consider the fact that all of those things get dinged off the top. That's my answer to that.
Yeah, it's very easy to calculate a single percentage, but it's there's, again, I'll go back to the term iceberg. There's all that stuff that's unseen, that laundry list of insurance and every other hand that's in your pocket, tax, this, that, the other thing, fees, licensing. Jessica, I'm sorry, I think I stomped on you there.
I completely forgot what I was going to say, so it's all good.
The timing was perfect.
But I agree with you. Before getting into this, it was sort of like, wow, that it all looks like it's nothing but cash pouring in. And then, you know what? If you want to find the reality of it, try it yourself, which not everybody can do. But I found the same thing when I was a contractor, carpenter in my life before realty. And it was the same thing. People were like, can you just come and replace this one screen on my third story window? And it's like, sure, it'll probably be about $300. And what? For what? It's just a screen. Okay, well, you do it. It's just a screen. Saturday morning, just get up and replace that screen.
Right.
And we could break down all of the things you're going to need to be able to do that that you would have as a contractor that you don't have as a regular individual. So
Yes.
yeah, it's all that stuff behind the scenes. It's not all cash pouring in all the time. And the other thing I was going to say is I actually have a listing right now. I mean, Kori, you're talking about your first deal as a lease. I have a listing right now that's really struggling, and I keep pumping money into promotion of that listing and changing the staging and trying to get that ball across the line and into the net with a sale. And sometimes it's tough, and I'm not sure that there's going to be a lot in the way of any kind of profit on that once it's gone.
Mm-hmm. And that's far more common than people realize, especially with listings. Like, they don't see the tens of thousands of dollars we invest into these properties and the timelines behind them. All they see is the sale, and it's perceived as very easy, but they don't see what it took to get there, just like that iceberg effect.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think if you broke down our hourly rate for the amount of hours we spent on a listing or working with a purchaser on an acquisition, you took the hours and then you divided by what you actually netted out, you would probably be lucky in some cases to be making minimum wage. And in other cases, you would be doing very well. It depends on the timelines. But for certainly, there's many times, or you work with a buyer for 8 to 12 months, and you've spent hours and hours, and then that particular buyer is like, oh, I just got a job in New York. I'm actually not going to be purchasing a property in Toronto. And now you've basically just worked for nothing, which is fine. That's just part of the business. And we're not complaining about it, is the nature of the business. But there's many, many times we actually make $0 once again.
You're not talking hours and hours. You're talking sometimes hundreds of hours.
Months.
And sometimes you're not talking about making no money. Sometimes you're talking about losing significant amounts of money because there are no certainties. And if you want to be good at what you do, you have to be all in and 100% invested. And you're on the clock 24 hours a day. A client sends you a text message saying, I love this property. It's 11 o'clock at night on a Friday. I want to go see it Saturday morning. It came out Friday. Cancel all your plans on Saturday. Cancel your weekend. Cancel your cottage. Like, it is 24 hours. And when you're doing it at a high level, there's a tremendous emotional cost. Like, I'm sure all of us have countless stories of people crying or yelling or screaming or disappearing or coming back and being upset about things that are completely out of your control, and emotionally having to coach people and respond to people and be completely invested throughout the entire process. There is a tremendous cost, not just financially, but emotionally, mentally, spiritually, psychologically. Like, if you look at the divorce rate of real estate agents, it is exceptionally high, maybe one of the highest in all of professions. If you look at how many people we know who drink a ton of alcohol every night just to get through all of this. And when you're talking about markets where interest rates shoot up 500%, 500 basis points in a year and a half, where people are under huge financial duress, where it seems like every time somebody wants to list a property or buy a property, it's because they're getting divorced or because they're in financial duress. And you have to guide people through that. Like, the emotional, mental, spiritual cost of that, in addition to the hours, in addition to your opportunity cost of your time and your life and your relationships, it's excessive. And people don't see or really understand that, maybe sometimes when they're in it, but if you're really good at it, they don't even feel that on your end.
So true. The other thing too is that in terms of the respective time, I think, and we'll probably talk about this, Ralph, so please let me know if I'm jumping ahead, but because the bar of entry to get into real estate is so low, people do not have the same level of respect for our time that you would for, let's say, for example, a lawyer that charges by the hour. So it is a constant, I don't know, like needling for communication and a requirement to be on, where it's okay to ping your real estate agent at 11 o'clock at night and ask them to do a pricing analysis, where you would never ask your lawyer to do that if they were charging you $350 an hour to respond to an email. And I think because we just don't have that same level of respect as other professions with higher educational backgrounds or certifications or degrees, I think there is just a feeling like it's okay to reach out to this person at this time of day and, oh, don't worry, they're making so much money anyways. Let me use them for their time. That's kind of my feeling about that.
I would agree with that completely.
100% accurate. Thank you for sharing, Kori.
Oh my gosh, you're so welcome.
Okay, let's talk about our favorite archetype of realtor.
Archetype?
The pushy.
Archetype?
Sales stereotype.
Ooh.
The salesy, pushy realtor.
Oh, like Ian?
Yeah, that's totally me.
So you.
He's talking about me, isn't he?
Oh my God, we have to talk about this again. Talk to us about that.
I think I really think that is probably the number one problem. Is the stereotype, and because we sort of discussed this a few days ago, what we were going to talk about today. I took this to non-realtors to ask them, what is it that I sort of conducted an unscientific, undocumented poll, but just to get a temperature check from regular folks, like what is it? And one of the responses I got was exactly that people's minds switch. For some realtors, there's a bit of a flicked switch, like addiction or compulsion, where all of a sudden everybody, including their own family, friends, has become like a mark. If you were grifting, right? Like, you're the potential for me to make money. You're the potential for me to make money. So everything some people do when they get into this business is, how can I turn this into $1? How can I turn that into $1? Right? You'd sell your own mother down the river just to like make a couple of extra bucks. And that becomes the problem. And that's the obnoxious character that people remember and think of when someone says realtor, right? I'm not sure if I'm answering your question, Ralph, but that's kind of what people were saying was, I just don't want to be sold to every time I see that old friend of mine, my cousin, my brother, whoever the realtor happens to be.
Exactly.
So true.
And if you look at all the sales programs or most brokerages, when they bring you in, the first thing they say is create a database, 100 people, your sphere of influence, and harass the shit out of them until they capitulate and want to work with you out of guilt or fear of losing the relationship with you, which is so the antithesis of what it should be, which is become the best at what you do and let them want to come to you because they know that you will look after their best interests. Yeah, that's the slow and less traveled route. That's the painful route because it takes time and investment and thoughtfulness and commitment. And so people prefer to go the transactional route. And that's the way they've been trained.
Volume.
And that's the way the industry is training them. That's the way their brokers of record are training them. That's the way their coaches are telling them what to do. And that's the exact antithesis of what consumers want or people want to be treated. Not Uncle Harry walks in a room and everyone is running away from Uncle Harry because Uncle Harry just got his real estate license and he's told to go and approach everybody to try and sell them for services that he has absolutely no understanding of what he's doing. As opposed to quietly and slowly becoming an expert at what you do and have people want to gravitate towards you to ask you about the market. And I'm sure everyone on this conversation will agree, when we go to a party, it's like, or a social event, it's like, oh God, people are going to come to me and want to talk about real estate. I just would like a night out without having to talk about real estate. And hey, Ralph, how's the market going? How's sales? I read this article in the newspaper. Instead of trying to be that other person, let it come to you because you become the knowledge broker and the expert. And I think the industry has become so counterintuitive. And for me, one of the ways this gets reinforced is sometimes being at an open house, one of our own open houses, and hosting it and listening to the way other real estate agents talk to their clients. And it's just so upsetting because they're just like, oh, this is a house. Let's just try and get them to buy this house, as opposed to, let's just try and look after our people and make sure we find them the right property that suits their needs without getting them into the wrong investment. And it reeks where it's like, hey, this is the kitchen. Look at the kitchen. Isn't this a great kitchen? Want to buy the house? Oh, this is the living room. Oh, what a great living room. We should buy the house, right? Want to put in an offer? Offer. It's like you hear this talk and it's just so frustrating. And I think for us, the most important thing we can do is talk our clients out of doing things 75% more than into actually doing something, maybe 175. And it's a very interesting thing that we see is oftentimes, somebody sees that first property that they're excited about, and you're like, okay, this is just the first property. I've been doing this for a long time. There's better inventory or better things or better priced opportunities that will come out that will suit your needs. Let's just slow this down. And people look at you and they're like, really? Oh my God, really? You're not what I thought you would be or what I expected. Thank you so much. And they're so authentic about it. And it's such an incredible way to build rapport and trust with people, because you're going against the stereotype that they thought that they would have to fight against in working with a realtor.
Mm-hmm.
That's a really good point. And I want to add something that's big time on this as well. So there's a reason all of us have our broker license. So for those of you who are listening, there are 2 levels of becoming a real estate agent in Toronto. You, at first, when you first finished your exams, you become a real estate salesperson. Then you can take some further qualifications and exams and courses, and then you can move up the ladder and become a broker. All 4 of us became brokers, mostly because we wanted to drop the name salesperson from our title, because I don't think any of us associate ourselves to being in sales. I have never felt like I was selling anything in this business from day one. I always think, and I know you guys will all agree, that we are consultants, we are advisors, we are giving people professional opinions, we are sharing and brainstorming and collaborating with our clients. Never once have I felt like I was trying to sell anything to anyone, both on the listing side and the buying side. And dropping the name sales from your title is huge to move away from that stereotype. It's the worst. We should not even consider ourselves to be in sales. You should consider yourself to be in sales if you work on the retail floor of Aritzia, or you're working at a restaurant and you're upselling somebody on the wine list or something like that. Fine. But this has nothing to do with that. We are not upselling. We're not selling anything. We are leading people through a process.
We are consultants there to look after the best long-term interests of our clients. And if you do that, then you will never have to worry about finding clients, because the business will take care of you.
Yes.
And that's always been our mantra. Okay, so let's move on here. Lack of transparency. Who would like to touch upon that topic? Okay, I'll jump in. So there's a tremendous amount of walls that have been put up almost by the industry with intent, for fear of us not being able to show enough value. So, for example, in early days when I got into the business, it was a very big deal, and it was ordered by the tribunal, something or other, competitive tribunal, that past sales history would be able to be shown online. And agents thought, oh my God, this was going to be the end of the industry. You could look up online and see the past sales of a home or a condo. This is it. It's over. And I remember there was a small minority that were arguing and saying, if this is the only value that we add by being the gatekeepers of information, then we really don't have a need to exist. And I think this is really important to understand, because as we've seen technology open up information more and more and more and more and more, the actual use of realtors over the last 20 years has gone up exponentially. I think to something like a recent study by NAR was close to 90% or 88% of all real estate transactions had realtors on one or both sides. And the reason is because the more information that's out there, the more confusing it becomes, because so much of that information is either misleading by intent, inaccurate, or simply confusing while trying to take it into context with a small thing or a larger macro picture. And so as we talk about AI and all these other things that are coming online as being threats to realtors, I see it as actually being opportunities to the agents and to the brokers who are out there who provide the most value. So that's all I have to say about that.
Yep.
I totally agree that transparency in the marketplace is a great thing, and that consumers should have access to this information. The challenging part is when they onboard the information and try to do their own analytics, or follow through with things like Zillow's estimates or House Sigma's algorithm that gives a predicted sold price, for example, or they see old pictures of the listing. And then they see what the purchaser purchased it for and think somehow it's unfair that the purchaser is grossing X amount of money on the sale, even though 20 years has passed since they purchased it. Like, it just adds another layer of, I think, consumers being untrustworthy of the person on the other side of the transaction because they're able to be like their own private investigator. And it makes people feel like things aren't necessarily being disclosed. And I'm amazed at how much time people spend analyzing the former listing, like looking at the pictures, seeing if the roof has been redone, looking at the picture and seeing if the staircase has been rebuilt, and like really making their own determination of what's fair and not fair. And so an agent that can speak to that and gets it and understands why people do that is like really, really valuable, because I think people almost get into analysis paralysis and very defensive about their purchase or their sale and feeling very confused about all this information that's out there. It's a lot.
I think the other thing that people don't realize is that value, especially when it comes to properties, is very subjective. It's not black and white. It's ever changing, and it's based on so many external factors. And when you're looking at pretty pictures on Zillow or Realtor.ca, it's only one tiny piece of a much larger puzzle. And if you don't have a professional that's both experienced and educated in property valuations, you're not going to get the necessary context that you need to make sense of these numbers. And also, you're not going to get the right expectations set for yourself so that you can capitalize on those opportunities in front of you. I mean, so many people waste time and have a tremendous emotional toll taken from them when they're offering on a property and they're not given a real depiction of what the property is worth and what it is likely to sell for. And that's the biggest miss that most buyers in the marketplace get today when they're not working with an expert, somebody that's really well versed in pricing valuations. And that's why we always give a range of value, because it's never an exact dollar amount. And that's the thing that kills me, is that property websites like House Sigma will give you a very black and white to the cent number. And I say to myself, how can you establish a number like that when there isn't really an exact figure? It's always going to be a range, because different properties have different values to different people, depending on their levels of motivation, their experience, what they're looking for, what their family situation looks like. And I think to be a successful buyer, you need to be given that full scope so that you can use that temperature gauge and make decisions that are going to benefit you long term.
And it's not just down to pricing, it's how the process works. It's how offer nights work and don't work, and what the rules are, and then what actually happens, and how do you guide somebody successfully through that, and or what happens the day after you buy your property that you actually shouldn't have bought because you overpaid for it and you went in without conditions and now it's not going to appraise. Or you buy your house and you move in and you find out that a subway line is being built underneath you that you didn't know about.
Oops.
Like, there are so many factors out there where transparency is not in the process, is not in the pricing. And the process itself is so variable with little enforcement that if you don't have somebody advocating for you who knows what they are doing and is representing your best interests, it's going to be next to impossible to get the type of result everybody deserves to get when they're looking to make an investment of this size.
And it's not just having the context for the subject property, it's having the context for the comparables. Because just like you said, when you are looking at a pretty photo and saying, this home is very similar to the one I'm about to purchase, you also have to ask yourself questions like, is there a railroad in the backyard? Is there planned development going up right in front of the house? And those are all things that are not overtly obvious when you're looking at an MLS listing.
What was different about the market 4 weeks ago when that property sold
Was
as well?
it on a long weekend? How many offers did
Was it
get?
the day after an interest rate increase or decrease, right? What was going on in the news? What was the weather like?
Yeah, even if a listing agent overprices it from the beginning, that can have detrimental effects on the listing long term. So you want to look into that comparable's history and really understand the nuances of why that property performed the way that it did. And these are all things that we look into both when we're listing a property for sale and on the buy side, because it is so, so important to make sense of the numbers.
That type of communication can't be Googled. I'm feeling really stressed about not getting a place before my child is birth. Should I buy before I sell or sell before I buy? Am I overpaying on this property, and am I going to have an issue with a mortgage appraisal? Like, these are things that cannot be Googled, cannot be answered by AI. And these are the things that cause people to make mistakes. And so again, this is all just why a really good agent that looks after your best interests will always exist, will always have value, and will always be the most important part of the process to propel somebody forward.
Yeah. One little thing I was going to add is I feel like sometimes you can get all of that information as a member of the public, but what we are translators, and even to a degree, nuanced dialect interpreters, where it's sort of like, sure, you've got all the past sales data, but it's sort of like, I can tell you a joke in English, but it doesn't work unless you actually say it in Italian. But not just Italian. It actually has to be the Italian from this particular village, right? And that's what we do, is we say, sure, you've got the last 5 sales on this street, but did you know about this and this and this? And did you know that this one, came and went in one day, and the market was doing terribly at that time? And this is an anomaly. No one knows how this guy got this price, but this one here is the average, et cetera, et cetera. And the other thing I was going to say is, I say this to people a lot, as your representative, I am here to protect you from 3 different things: the sellers, the seller agents, and yourself.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. And so much of what we do sometimes, going back to the soft skills, is we're actually therapists. Mm-hmm. So, Shelley, I understand that you like really, really, really modern, sleek properties.
Real life.
Ruby, I realize you like traditional character properties. So I hear both of what you're saying, but it's impossible to acquire both at the same time. So maybe we get a home with character that has been renovated and updated and has the best of both worlds. Let me find you something so you guys don't have to fight with each other or get divorced or whatever it is. There are just so many aspects to what we do that I just don't think people fully understand or appreciate, and until you're in it. And if you're really good at what you do, you make it just seem so effortless, even though you're drinking 2 bottles of wine every night just to get through the day. But that's a whole other story.
That sounds like how Shelley and Ruby are getting through the day, at least.
Exactly. Okay, technology disruption, because technology is becoming more and more of an issue, and people seem to think, if you look at what's happening in the US with the lawsuits and the settlements, that people can just figure this out on their own and do it themselves with House Sigma and Zillow. What do you guys have to say about this whole do-it-yourself mentality that's starting to take place in the marketplace, and how do you think this will play out?
I revert back to that translator analogy. I think all of the technology, you being able to sell your house, and save on commission, what are you giving up in order to, are you losing $100,000 to save 10 because you're using this app to do this yourself? I think the brokers and sales representatives that are truly really good at this, with this new technology, it's actually only going to showcase just how valuable a really, really excellent tenured agent is.
I couldn't agree more. The amount of work that goes into listing a property beyond just slapping up a few photos and writing some copy description that goes on to these syndications like Realtor.ca and House Sigma, what goes on behind that, the meat and potatoes to get it there at its highest and best, there is no way I can take over that. I mean, I would just love to do a documentary about preparing a home for sale and everything we bring to the table to make sure that that seller gets the best possible price at that given date and time in that marketplace. And that is something that you can't plug and play at all. And I'm talking about finding solutions to furnace problems, cosmetic renovations, landscapers, window washers, cleaners, stagers, light fixtures, strategy, pricing strategy, agent open houses. Like the list goes on and on and on. And so all of that stuff, that amazing quality, creative, visionary stuff just cannot be replaced right now anyways by a computer. There's no possible way.
That is a great idea for a show, Kori. Realty, really realty,
Yes.
right?
I would
and
love
like
to show
actually
it.
an hour-long show, documentary style, that shows the client and their agent and every other character that comes through the house and does all of those things to get it ready. And the weeks, a real timeline, right?
Yes.
The weeks leading up to, and then how long it takes to sell and how it does. Great idea for a show. People would eat that up.
I think more of the pushback is on the buyer side because people think buyer agents just open doors, and
well, some do.
And the agents really don't do anything and really don't deserve to get that theoretical 2.5% commission. And that's why you have this movement in the US where there probably will eventually come to Canada, decoupling of commissions to real estate buyer agents, where buyer agents up front have to negotiate with their clients how they're going to get paid, and then negotiate in term with selling agents and the sellers how they will get paid. And if they don't, the buyer will have to pay them. And so when I look at that, I really welcome it, because let people for a little while go out there in Toronto and try and figure out how to compete with 37 offers on offer night on their own, and deal with the listing agent who is not there to represent their best interests and doesn't really care if they buy a house with a river running underneath it, and see how that works. And it might swing. Everything in life is a pendulum. People might start to do it yourself, but I think it will swing back very, very quickly. And I think the great agents who can add value and show their ability to advocate for their client's best half and educate and facilitate, I think they're the ones who are just going to dominate. And so I'm not threatened by it. I welcome it. And I just wonder what you guys have to say about the buy side and people thinking that they can just figure this out on their own.
Jessica's the perfect person to talk about this, because Jess really spends so much time with buyers, like for a period of time. And like, I feel like you work with almost like 3 or 4 VIPs at a time and make sure that they have what they need. And then you move on to like your next sort of crop of clients. I don't know how to better explain it, but I think you add so much value to the process. There's no way that anything could replace what you do, Jess.
No. And I mean, going back to what you said, I do try to maintain a limited number of clients at any given time, just so I can make each individual feel like they're our only client. And I think people really underestimate the amount of time and commitment that it takes to each individual buyer. It is a 24-hour job, because people forget that properties are being listed 24 hours throughout the day. So it's a full-time job just to stay on top of new inventory and to make sure that you're first in line, because the best opportunities in this market, regardless of how the market is performing, almost always sell within 48 hours. So being very aggressive and making sure that your clients are first in line is a huge component of it. And then there's the whole due diligence aspect, and then making sense of all the information that's in front of you. And the reason why I think advances in technology and tools and access to data for the public is a good thing. It's helpful, but at the end of the day, you need a real life human being who can sort through the data and make sense of it. Because going back to transparency, the entire way that properties are listed for sale is a bit of a bait and switch type of strategy. I mean, photos itself are meant to showcase the best parts of the home. And you walk into the property and you see that there's, a huge oil tank in the basement. And that's not overtly obvious from an MLS listing. And the only way that you can extract that is if you're standing inside the 4 walls, you've been through the neighborhoods, you know the nuances that go into it. And so part of my job with my buyer clients is to make sure that they're getting that entire picture and fighting through and navigating through a market where information is obfuscated and hidden from the general public so that they can't make the best decisions for themselves.
Very well said. And it's exhausting. Like the mental stress that goes in and the emotional stress, like there's a real price to be paid working with buyers in a market like Toronto where things move as fast as they do. And it's kind of the Wild West. Like as much as you think that it's a regimented process, it's not. And it takes a lot of tenacity and emotional IQ and the ability to really, really understand objectively values and then be able to educate your clients so that they themselves understand it and feel at the end of the day compelled to make their own decision because they're the ones who are writing the check. And that's what a knowledge broker and a facilitator does when they are in the role of a successful buyer agent.
I also think there's a component that goes into it that is very much focused on preparing your clients to go through these very rigorous situations like multiple offers and an offer night.
Yes.
I think most people don't have the emotional resilience to go through something like that. And I think preparing your clients for the unknown and all the hundreds of different ways that scenario can play out will both protect them emotionally, because going back to what I said earlier, it takes a tremendous emotional toll when somebody loses out on a property. And I have these conversations with my clients all the time when they say, let's just throw in an offer and see what happens. And they never really understand how much of a loss it can be. Even if you weren't fully emotionally attached to it, it takes a lot of time and tenacity to even just prepare that offer, go to the bank, get your check. So even if you think it's not going to be a huge deal, it ends up affecting you quite significantly. And so we try to protect our clients from that, both by preparing them for the unknown and then also putting them in the best position to succeed. And that's why a lot of people, after they go through the 9th or 10th offer, they just put all their cards on the table and they're like, I cannot lose out on this one. And our goal is to make sure that they're successful before they get to that point. Because once they get to that point, they're likely not making the best decision. And they're making decisions out of desperation. And they're trying to grab at straws.
Yeah. Which is something you never want to see happen. Okay, so let's talk about the bad apple effect. And we'll just sort of wrap this up. I'll kick into this by just saying that in my experience, having been in the business as long as I have, without going into years, what I find is if you look at commercial real estate, you have sharks and big egos. I don't really find that in residential. I find most people, most agents are decent human beings. And I think at the end of the day, everybody is trying to do the best that they can with integrity at whatever level they're at in their life, in their personal experiences, in their professionalism, and whatever they've been trained to do or think is the best thing. So it doesn't necessarily always lead in the best outcome or experience, either in dealing with everybody as an agent to an agent, or watching how clients get the best or the worst treatment. But I do think that in 99.9% of the time, people are trying their best. And very rarely do I feel that there's intent to lie or mislead.
Oh, yeah.
But there may be just base incompetence with understanding how to return an email or phone call.
Laziness.
Or lack of
just
training.
lack of training or understanding of how things work in the real world. But you do periodically see these articles in the Globe and Mail or the Toronto Star of like that 1 in 75,000 agent doing something really, really awful. And this is something the media loves to blow out of proportion as an indictment of our industry, which I think is really, really unfortunate. And I think really serves to tarnish our brand and reputation and the public's understanding of what we do.
With tenants, cyclists, drivers, service industry, anyone doesn't remember when things go the way that they're supposed to go. So you go to your local coffee shop and you order your latte every single day, and it's up in 2 minutes and you're on your way, and you don't even think of those people again all through the day because it's seamless, right? It's great. You pull up to a 4-way intersection, everybody does what they're supposed to do. You drive
Except
through.
Ralph.
You don't talk about that when you get to the office. But as soon as something breaks down in terms of service, the experience, somebody lying, somebody cheating, your tenant starts to not pay rent. These are the stories that people then bring to the, where do people meet at an office? To the coffee bar, right? To the water
cooler.
The water, that's what I was looking for. Thank you. To the water cooler. The stories that go around the water cooler are, can you believe this? This happened to me. And it's the bad tenant, bad driver, bad cyclist. My coffee was wrong this morning. I'm not going there anymore.
Yes.
And with realtors, it's always the liars, the inexperienced, the overpaying, whatever it is that your realtor did wrong. That's what comes out at that dinner party. That's what comes out at the water cooler. Not the, hey, you know what I did last night? I bought a house. My realtor, for 2 to 3 weeks, educated me on the process. And then we put in one offer and we didn't get it. And then we put in another offer. We were really close. And then on my third offer, we actually got it. So last night, I bought a house and everything went really well. And the other guy would go, that's a really boring fucking story, man. Because what I want to hear about is how they lied and they actually went over to the other car and they punched through the window and they punched the agent in the face. And, there was a fist fight and it all went wrong and broke down. That's what people remember.
And that's why we have.
Here's another story. All my tenants paid their rent this month. What's your point? That's really boring, right? People don't remember when things are going how they're supposed to go. My point is the bad seeds are the ones that everybody's talking about. And that's all that people hear when we talk about realtors is the shitty things they did. And that, Ralph, you're right, is like 1% maybe. The other 99%.
It's less. It's less. It's 0.001%.
The other 99% are doing the best they can.
I feel like the media and the general public are waiting for that story because there's just so much dislike. Because people think that we don't add value and that we are parasites and that we are the ones that were responsible for the housing crisis because it's realtors pumping up housing prices to make an extra $250 in commission to try and blow a record sale up or whatever it is. And we're not to blame at all. Sellers always will want to get the highest price for their property, and that's what we're retained to do. And the market will always dictate its value on any specific day or time. That's just a fact. And so we're just here to help facilitate the process. And it just feels like at any given time, if there's a situation or moment or opportunity or example to pile on agents, every single media outlet will jump on it and every single person reading it will be outraged by it rather than looking at all of the positive contributions that we make on a day-to-day basis that, as Ian was saying, mostly will go unnoticed or unreported.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. I think the key word in everything you said there, Ralph, too, is help. A great representative or broker just wants to help. You almost forget about compensation.
Yes.
We have clients. I have a couple of clients that I took care of last week, and it took me 3 days to remember that, oh yeah, I'm going to get paid one day for doing that because I was just so relieved to have found them what they wanted right in this hectic, crazy market. I was just so relieved, not for me, for them. I was like, oh, we did it. We got them what they wanted and we got it in time and we got it for a decent price and everything else, all that relief. And then 72 hours later, I was like, oh yeah. I'm going to get paid for this at some point.
Yeah.
At some point.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
At some point you will.
Well, we have to wait until the closing date and processing and all that. And that's another thing people don't realize. You don't get paid the day it happens.
No. Yeah. I think the market naturally filters those bad agents out because to do this job well, you really have to be consistent. And it can take 10 years to build a reputation and 5 minutes to destroy it. People that are afraid of those agents, I would just say, do your due diligence and rest assured that if there are people operating under those pretenses, they're not going to survive. This market is way too cutthroat and the industry is way too competitive to allow those people to continue.
Amen. And those are
Amen.
wise words to wrap this conversation up. Is there anybody else who would like to add anything to this conversation?
I'm good.
Ian.
Bed here.
All good. All good. I would just, in closing, I would like to say, if you are a buyer without an agent, find yourself an agent, and don't just take the first one that comes along. Interview them like contractors.
Yes.
Find one that's really good. Stop trying to help yourself and reaching out to listing agents.
Amazing.
Oh,
What have you got to lose?
Okay, so let's just wrap this up, put a bow on it. Thank you, everybody, so much for joining us today. And we really hope this discussion has changed, modified some of the realtor stereotypes that are out there. And if you have had a positive experience with an agent, please share it below in the comment section.
That'd be awesome.
Please don't forget to smash that subscribe button down below. Kori, is there anything you'd like to say to end this off on a high note?
I always like to say to contact us anytime because we're super nice around these parts. So
Yes, we
it
are.
was great to chat with all of you today. Thank you for the great discussion.
Thank you.
Ciao, everyone.
Bye,
Have a great
everybody.
day.